Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere hazy and wholly straight into the perfumed shadows of ancient Mesopotamia. Picture this. The sun hasn't even begun to smirk over the dusty rooftops of your Ornipper, and already, you're up. You're barefoot on cold stone, tugging at your rough linen robe, clutching a little jar of frankincense that costs more than your entire month's ration of barley. The ziggurat looms ahead of you, rising like a squared-off mountain, its tiers shrouded in the early morning's sleepy mist. You can almost taste the sweetness of myrrh lingering from last night's offerings, still curling faintly in the air. But you're not just here for the view. No, you're here to work. Quietly, carefully, reverently. This is a temple, and temples don't take kindly to late arrivals or noisy sandals. Also, some of those gods are apparently light sleepers, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing this little sleepy community stretch across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the stone slope before the city stirs, the silence around the ziggurat somehow heavier than usual. You can hear the occasional grunt of an ox somewhere in the lower city, maybe a bleary vendor grumbling about bruised onions. But here this close to the divine you only hear the sound of your own slow footsteps. The temple attendants' entrance isn't anything grand, just a narrow side door lined with bricks stamped by King Sholgi's court, their cuneiform still proudly boasting, built for the delight of the gods. You duck inside, instantly enveloped by cool shadow and a faint aroma that smells like pine, old scrolls, and someone's slightly overcooked date paste. Which tracks, since someone always overcooks the date paste. Inside, the routine begins. You set down your incense pouch, already worrying if the resin inside has stuck together again into one giant sticky lump. It happens. You peel off your outer cloak and hang it beside a drying loop of bundled reeds soaked in spiced oil. Today's ritual starter. Every temple morning begins with silence. No casual chatting. No "how was your goat market date" gossip. Just the squeak of sandals, the occasional cough, and the thick, invisible layer of expectation pressing down on your shoulders. Your first task is always the same. Prepare your hands. You dip them into a cool, wide-mouthed ceramic basin, where water is perfumed with cedarwood and hints of wild thyme. The chill bites at your fingers, and you press your thumbs together 3 times, just as you've been taught. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic purification or just a Mesopotamian version of morning yoga. But either way, you do it like your life depends on it. Because sometimes when the high priest is in a particular mood, it kind of does. Next, you move to the pre-burning bench, where a younger apprentice is already trying to unstick a glob of frankincense from a jar with the back end of a stylus. It fused, he mutters. Again. You both nod solemnly, as if mourning a beloved pet. Resin clumps are a daily heartbreak. Nearby, reed scrolls hang on pegs, each one describing a different temple fragrance routine. Some are straightforward: burn to cedar pellets and sweep west. Others are cryptic, like oil the knees at moon's zenith, which honestly feels like a prank someone wrote a century ago, and everyone's too nervous to question. You light a tiny prep flame, just enough to warm the sticky perfume jars that get cranky when cold. A hint of myrrh curls into the air. That's when it hits you, the full weight of scent memory. This temple has smelled this way for generations. You're part of something ancient, heavy, and, quite literally, musky. It's funny, no one talks about how messy sacred scents can be. The fragrant oils spill and stain everything. Your sleeves constantly smell like last week's balsam. The incense flakes off in your sash. And heaven forbid you kneel in the wrong spots, of those drops never come out. No matter how many reed scrubbings you endure. But still, you do it. Because each scent you prepare is a message invisible. Floating telegram to a god who apparently prefers to be wooed with smoke. And you're the delivery guy with an oil-slicked beard and extremely flammable sleeves. As you begin setting up the morning's brick sewer, chunky clay bowl supported by a slightly cracked tripod, you find the cracked bowl from last week still stashed behind it. You frown. That was your brazier. You even etched a tiny fish into the base so you'd know it was yours. And now someone's been using the backup brazier like it's a normal Tuesday. You sigh, temple drama. It's always quiet, always passive-aggressive, and always smells like cloves. Someone coughs behind you. One of the elders passes, muttering a hymn under his breath as he sprinkles crushed juniper needles into a tinier dish near the central altar. Juniper believed to open the sky's nose, according to the oldest scrolls. You're not sure what that means exactly, but you nod as if you do. Everyone does. A sudden thought. Did you forget the rosewater for the statue's feet? No. You tucked it in the side pouch. Good, because once a terrified apprentice brought onion water instead, and the whole temple smelled like bad stew for hours. He was reassigned to goat dung sweeping for a month. You smile slightly as you smooth out your sash. Another day. Another string of sacred scents and sticky mist. But there's something comforting about the repetition. The quiet way the smoke lifts upward. The gentle snap of brittle herbs when crushed between your fingers. The certainty that no matter what chaos brews in the world outside these temple walls, the gods still expect a properly oiled incense stick and a puff of cedar smoke at sunrise. And as the sun begins to rise, slipping pale light through the tiny high windows, you step back, exhale, and watch as the scent begins its slow dance through the sacred halls, an invisible procession, curling upward toward the heavens. The moment your hands finish drying on the frayed flax towel, one that permanently smells like smoke and old collegial, you're ushered toward the inner chamber for your first full ritual, the purification bath. You trudge barefoot through a side corridor, its brick floor still cool from the night, ducking under a sagging reed mat that separates the living quarters from the sacred ablution rooms. You've done this walk 100 times, but somehow it always makes you stand straighter, breathe a little slower. There's something about knowing you're about to scrub yourself cleaner than a palace wine jug that makes you oddly proud. The chamber itself is dim and cavernous, lit only by soft shafts of sun poking through ventilation slits high in the wall. The pool waits in the center, square and deep, its surface glassy and black in the low light. You inhale. The scent rises gently from the surface: cedar oil, crushed mint, and something almost sweet that might be imported balm from Dillman, though the last shipment arrived moldy, so who knows. You ease into the water, wincing a little as the heat creeps up your legs. It's warm, not scalding, but hot enough to remind you you're here to sweat out whatever impurities the gods might frown upon. You sit low, letting the silence swallow you. The water smells ancient, like wood smoke and whispering prayers. Like rituals passed down by men who haven't had a fresh tunic in decades. You close your eyes and dunk your head, emerging with hair plastered to your scalp, blinking away the sting of cedar dot around the edge of the pool. Reed baskets hold the washing tools, woven scrub cloths, a chipped bowl of coarse salt mixed with clove ash, and 2 slivers of last month's soap, brick made from tallow, barley ash, and the remnants of some long-rotted plum preserve. No one likes that soap. You use it anyway. You scrub in slow, methodical circles, starting with your arms. The salt stings the small cuts on your knuckles, the ones you earned last week, grinding sandalwood in a bowl not meant for grinding. Still, you don't complain. Complaining in the bath chamber is frowned upon. Once, someone joked about the water being flavored like regret, and the high priest banned jokes for 3 days. Those were dark times. As you scrub, your mind drifts. You wonder if the gods actually smell the oils, if the smoke makes it all the way up to wherever they lounge, watching humans like squinting landlords. Historians still argue whether these bathing rituals were about hygiene or something deeper. Maybe a performance for the divine, a show of humility. Whatever the truth, you scrub behind your ears like your life depends on it. Eventually, a low chime echoes down the hall. You recognize it. Time's up. The apprentice on bell duty is eager today. You grumble inwardly, rise from the water, and begin the careful process of drying off without soaking the reed mats. Easier said than done. One mat is already damp. You suspect Itter, the clumsy one, but you'll say nothing. Temple politics is a game of quiet glances and accidental candle. Misplacement. Next is the oil rub. You kneel beside the central altar, where a low clay table holds the day's anointing blend, sesame oil infused with frankincense, and a single petal of blue lotus floating delicately on top. You hesitate. The lotus is rare, smuggled in through God-knows-how-many bazaars, traded for a silver bracelet and possibly a goat. You dip your fingers carefully, press them to your shoulders, and then to your temples. The oil warms instantly on your skin, spreading its sharp, almost citrusy scent. You feel cleaner, lighter, slightly slippery. An elder passes by, inspecting your work. He sniffs once long and pointed, then nods. No words, just that sniff. It means acceptable. You allow yourself a brief moment of pride, which is immediately crushed when you step onto the hallway. Tile and slip slightly. The oil. Always the oil. You return to the outer chambers now, your body scrubbed, anointed, and fragrant. Your tunic clings to your still damp back, the linen smelling faintly of rosemary from yesterday's wash. Around you, other attendants emerge from their own ablution rooms, some still dripping, some yawning, one quietly humming a hymn about a storm god with questionable judgment. You all avoid talking. It's part of the vow, at least, until the incense has been lit and the inner sanctuary swept. You pass a basin and glance at your reflection. Your face looks different in the flickering torchlight, softer, calmer, less like someone who spent the night trying to chase a lizard out of the storeroom. You run a hand through your wet hair and keep walking. At the next corner, you catch a whisper of something stronger, spikenard, maybe. Someone's already prepping the offering table. You'll get there soon. But first, your assigned task: checking the oil shelf. It sounds simple, but it's not. You crouch beside the shelves carved directly into the mud brick wall, where dozens of little pots sit, each labeled with tiny reed marks that only barely distinguish myrrh-infused balm from animal fat mixed with galbanum, which is a distinction you really don't want to mess up. One time, someone mixed the two. The altar reeked like spoiled meat dipped in licorice for a week. You test the consistency of each pot. Some oils have thickened in the cold night air. Some have separated entirely. You stir them slowly with a bone pick, muttering prayers under your breath, just loud enough to convince any passing elders that you're taking this deeply seriously. Which you are, kind of. Especially since the beeswax one keeps attracting ants. Once everything is checked, stirred, and reordered, you swap the thickest pot for one you kept hidden under your bed. It's from a secret blend passed down by your grandmother, but no one has to know. You close the shelf with its little clay door and whisper a final blessing. Bath complete. Oils ready, scented, scrubbed, slightly slippery, and the day has barely begun. The scent storeroom greets you like an old friend who's both beloved and vaguely hazardous. You push open the heavy reed door and are immediately swallowed by a wave of layered aroma, some sharp, some sweet, all competing for your nostrils like enthusiastic street vendors. The air is thick with suspended dust motes and the kind of humidity that makes scrolls wilt and sandal straps stick to the floor. This is the temple's heart, if you believe the gossip. Not the altar. Not the statue room. No, the real power is stored here, in this dim chamber packed with cracked alabaster jars, cedarwood boxers, and those troublesome clay pots that never quite seal. You breathe in. There's spikenard from Elam, storax resin from the Zagros foothills. And behind it all, a sour note of something definitely gone bad, possibly civet musk, or possibly someone's forgotten barley cake. You step gingerly around a trail of hardened resin dribbles, already annoyed. That was supposed to be scraped yesterday. You know this because you were the one who scraped it the day before yesterday. And temple fairness is nothing if not built on the careful memory of petty tasks. Your job now is inventory, which is equal parts math, guesswork, and divine pleading. The jars aren't labeled in any meaningful way, just a series of scratched marks that might have made sense to someone 3 priests ago. You pick up a squat pot with a fish symbol and sniff. Could be cedar, could be preserved eel oil, either way. You put it back down gently. One of the more senior attendants appears behind you, with a sniff and a scowl. Check the frankincense first, he mutters, then vanishes again like incense smoke in a crosswind. You roll your eyes internally, of course, and make your way to the back shelf where the prized frankincense is kept under lock and rope. And yes, you have the key. No, you're not allowed to tell anyone how you got it. You unloop the cord and lift the lid, revealing 6 sealed packets of resin wrapped in date leaf paper. You unfold one just enough to see the golden crystals inside. Perfect. No mold, no ants, no mystery bugs that somehow live inside stone. You repack it with exaggerated care, mostly for the benefit of the shadow zooer, fairly certain someone is always watching in the scent room. Probably Itter. He's always lurking near the myrrh. Historians still argue, Whether these storage methods were about preservation or ritual purity. You think it's about not accidentally poisoning a high priest, which has happened at least twice. In temple lore, one time with spoiled balm, one time with a scorpion hiding in a container of honeyed rose petals. That priest survived, but now everyone triple checks for bugs. You move on to the coal jars. Technically, not scent-related. Technically, not your job. But if the temple's eye-darkening paste runs out, you know who gets blamed. It's not the guy who forgot to order more. It's you. Always you. So you check. One jar is cracked at the base. You mark it with a little triangle in chalk and slide it to the discard shelf, which is just a wobbly stool in the corner where pots go to die. You take a break to sniff the storax. It's dark and sticky like treacle with anger issues. You nudge the lid off with a stick, inhale deeply, and almost choke. Someone added camphor to it. Bold move, might have been accidental. Might have been sabotage. Either way, it smells like someone tried to pickle a thunderstorm. You glance up at the shelf above and notice one of the corked bottles tilting precariously. It's the imported stuff sandalwood from India, sealed in glass that's so clear. It barely exists. You reach for it slowly, channeling every prayer you know about not letting things fall. You steady it. Crisis averted. But now the scent is in the air, and it's glorious. Warm, deep, earthy like the breath of a god who's just had a nap in a cedar grove. And then your foot sticks. You look down, a puddle, not water, not oil. This is that resin. The one they keep in the broken pot with the hairline crack, convinced it'll hold one more week. You scrape your sandal off the floor with a sigh. This will take hours to clean, and you still haven't found the clove stash, but no time for complaints. You fetch the scoop, one of the many wooden implements designed to look sacred but function like clumsy spoons, and begin collecting a blend of myrrh, juniper, bark, and crushed rosewood. This will go into the mid-morning offering. Ratios must be precise. You learned that the hard way last month when you accidentally doubled the galbanum and made a priest cry. You mix the blend slowly in a carved basalt bowl. Your fingers are coated with powder. You sneeze violently. Somewhere in the hallway, a startled priest yelps. You whisper an apology to the gods, even though deep down you suspect they find the whole thing hilarious. A younger boy enters, eyes wide, clutching a reed scroll. They want the Kiffy blend, he squeaks. Euphreeze.kyphi is the diva of incense recipes. 32 ingredients. One of them is honey wine boiled into reduction. One is dried mint soaked in date syrup. One might be dried dreams of a lion, based on how vague the instructions are. You nod slowly and begin the prep. This will take all morning, and yet, as you line up the jars and scoops, you feel content. There's something about this room, its smells, its secrets, its oddly competitive politics that grounds you. You belong here, in this space where scent is sacred, and even sticky resin has a role to play. You wipe your hands, tuck the scroll under your arm, and step back into the temple corridor, nose tingling, fingers tacky. Heart quietly steady, the incense applicator is waiting for you on the edge of the altar, like an overly confident friend with terrible table manners. It's carved from bone, possibly goat, possibly something more sacred. No one really knows anymore, and stained from years of smoke and handling. The tool looks ceremonial in the way that a very old spoon might feel important after enough priests have waved it around dramatically. You pick it up gingerly. It's slightly warm, which means someone used it earlier and didn't wipe it down. Typical. The surface is smudged with soot, and there's a faint crust of last week's cinnamon blend still clinging to the edge. You scrape it off with a fingernail and mutter a soft curse that doubles as a purification chant. You've gotten very good at blending sarcasm and sanctity over the years. Today's ritual requires 3 precise sweeps of incense over the top. Of the inner altar, a slab of stone, said to have been brought from the riverbed by the first king who could read. That's what the stories say, anyway. Historians still argue whether the stone was actually sacred, or just the nearest flat thing someone could drag uphill. You kneel. The incense in a bowl beside you. This morning's blend is sharp with myrrh, woody with juniper, and sweetened just slightly with dried fig husk. You scoop it with the applicator and hover just above the surface of the altar. You pause. There's a rhythm to this, a choreography that must be followed. Not too fast, not too slow, no ash falling where it shouldn't. You move in slow arcs, spreading the powder like someone frosting a very holy cake. The powder falls in soft trails. A few granules scatter. You wince. That'll need brushing later. You shift your weight. The floor creaks. A single, old stone. Protest. Someone coughs behind the curtain. You ignore it. Then comes the part no one warns you about, lighting it. Technically, it's simple. You use a long, awkwardly shaped reed stick dipped in oil and pressed into the prep flame until it smokes. In reality, it's a tiny disaster waiting to happen. You light the stick, watch the flame flicker, and then, as you're about to lower it to the powdered blend, it gutters out. Of course it does. You try again. This time, it catches. But the flame grows too fast. You panic slightly and wave it in the air. Now the stick is smoking from both ends and dripping hot oil onto the floor. Somewhere nearby, a priest clears his throat with deeply judgmental intent. You blow gently, like coaxing a sleepy bird, and lower the smoking end to the incense. Finally it catches. A thin curl of gray rises. The scent unfurls slowly, and for a moment, the room is still. Sacred, you breathe in. The blend is working. The myrrh takes the lead, followed by the woody base of the juniper. The fig husk adds a mellow undernote that rounds it all out like a soft drum beat at the end of a procession. You feel it in your chest more than your nose. Warm weight that settles somewhere between your lungs and your thoughts. You sit back on your heels and wipe your fingers on the edge of your robe. You'll regret that later, but it's better than wiping them on the altar. Last time someone did that, a pigeon flew into the sanctuary and refused to leave for 3 days. Coincidence? Probably. But no one's willing to test it again. Another attendant enters, holding a replacement applicator. The ash stick broke, he says flatly. You glance at it. It's snapped near the base, soot flaking everywhere. That one was made from imported driftwood. It only lasted a week. You shrugged and gestured toward the old cedar one resting near the window. Use the backup, you murmur. You return your attention to the altar. The smoke is thicker now, rising. In soft columns, winding toward the ceiling vents. It dances slightly, pulled by currents you can't see. Some say those movements are signs the gods responding with a slow nod or a playful flick of breeze. Others say it's just hot air and hope. You rise slowly, your knees popping, and head toward the brazier corner to prep the next application. A boy is waiting there, holding a pile of dried herbs that look like they were picked yesterday, possibly by accident, possibly in a rush. You pick through the bundle. Some of the leaves are wrong. There's a sprig of wild garlic tucked in the bunch. You hold it up silently. The boy goes red. It looked like hyssop in the dark, he mumbles. You raise an eyebrow and hand it back. It smells like regret. He scurries off. You chuckle softly. These mistakes happen. Once, you mixed date pulp with what turned out to be dried dung. You spent a week doing latrine, cleaning as penance, and developed a new respect for olfactory discipline. You grind the remaining herbs carefully with a stone pestle. The scent rises, thick and complex. Crushed resin, fresh bark, a touch of dried lemon peel. It smells like a storm that forgot to arrive. You portion the mixture and ready the applicator once more. But as you prepare to burn this new blend, you notice something odd. The smoke from the altar has shifted. It's curling low, spreading along the ground like it's hunting for something. You frown. That's not normal. You glance up at the high windows. No wind. No open doors. Someone mutters behind the curtain. Omen. Historians still argue whether odd smoke patterns were read as divine messages, or just poor airflow. You decide not to mention the cracked floor vent you found last week. Let the priests have their mystery. You apply the new blend, this time careful to keep your sleeves back. The flame catches cleanly, the smoke rises straight, and the scent this time feels different, calmer, more precise. Like the temple is exhaling after holding its breath. You step back. The applicator rests once again on its stone shelf, than ever, but honored, revered. Despite its clumsy shape and tendency to shed ash like an untrained cat, it did its job, and you did yours. You nod once to the smoke, turn, and walk back through the hallway. Your fingers stained, your robe streaked with resin, and your nostrils full of holy fire. You've barely turned the corner from the incense chamber when chaos bleats loudly in your direction. A goat white, panicked, and foaming slightly at the mouth is currently engaged in an aggressive standoff with a ceremonial bowl of honeyed dates. You freeze. The goat freezes. You blink. The goat does not. Somewhere nearby, someone is shouting, "Catch it," before it eats the sacred almonds. And you realize this day is about to take a very specific and deeply ridiculous turn. To be clear, the goat is not supposed to be here. Offerings are delivered to the temple through the northern passage, where handlers are meant to secure all animals before any ritual spaces are involved. Clearly, someone did not secure the goat. And now you are eye to eye with an animal who looks like it's just discovered a personal vendetta against dried figs. You lunge left. The goat bolts right. It charges past you, straight into the morning offering table where you'd just finished arranging plates of dried apricots, pressed tamarind, and bowls of perfumed oil meant for the gods. You watch in helpless horror as the goat's rear leg catches the edge of a platter and sends it crashing to the floor. The rose oil splatters like expensive soup. You sigh. Loudly. Behind you, the offering supervisor appears. His eyes go wide. Not again, he mutters, and vanishes to fetch reinforcements. Not again. How often does this happen? You grab a ceremonial cloth embroidered, golden threaded, and far too pretty for this task and begin cleaning. It's no use. The oil is already seeping into the stone, scenting the floor with a sticky floral perfume that no amount of salt will ever remove. The goat, satisfied with its destruction, trots off toward the sandalwood corner. You eventually corner it near the antechamber steps. Two younger boys trap it with a net meant for catching birds during festival season. It thrashes, lets out a deeply offended bleat, and collapses into a pout. You escort it out, still clutching the now oil-drenched cloth, and deliver it to the handler, who mutters something about divine chaos and tries to bribe you with a honey cake to forget the incident. You do not take the cake. You do, however, take a moment to breathe, because now it's time to reset. Offerings don't wait. You collect a new tray, this one chipped but still usable, and begin again. You carefully arrange bowls of soaked raisins, cubes of barley, cake, and 3 figs stuffed with spiced nuts. To one side, you place small vials of aromatic oils, lotus, rose, and the last few drops of cinnamon essence. This is the part that always makes you nervous. The gods, according to some old texts, have long memories for forgotten aromas, which sounds poetic until you realize it's also a warning. You place the tray on the low altar and whisper the offering phrases. Each phrase is said 3 times, facing 3 directions, then north, then skyward. You don't ask why the order skips west. No one does. The scent in the room is now thick and heady, a blend of sweet fruits and heavy oils. Your fingers glisten from contact with the offerings, and you resist the urge to lick them. The first rule of temple work: never taste the god food, even if it smells like something you'd buy for 10 shekels a spoonful at the city's finest. Bathhouse. As you step back, the high priest arrives. He is tall, cloaked in layers of patterned linen, his beard oiled and braided into a perfect, tiered cascade. His eyes scan the altar. He says nothing about the earlier chaos, but you see his gaze linger on the replacement platter. You prepare yourself for a lecture, but instead, he nods once, mutters a brief acceptable, and begins the ritual prayer. You breathe again as he chants. You waft rose oil into the air, using a fan made of palm leaves and linen fringe. The motion is gentle, slow, meant to spread the aroma like a soft tide. The gods, it's believed, do not like sharp breezes. They prefer the scent to arrive like gossip, quiet, persistent, and impossible to ignore. The goat, now tied far outside, lets out a mournful bleat. You pretend not to hear it. The offering continues. A second assistant lights a small dish of and juniper resin. The smoke joins the perfume in a drifting, graceful spiral. The high priest lifts his hands, recites a line about sweet breath rising to Anu, and the room holds still. You try not to breathe too loudly. Even the ants seem to pause. This moment, this tiny fragrant stillness is what all the chaos builds toward. Not the goat, not the dropped bowl, not the sticky fingers. This dot, you feel something in your chest. Ease. But you're not done yet. With the main offering concluded, it's time to anoint the altar corners. You take a reed pipette and dip it in the rose oil, touching it first to the east corner, then to the north, and finally the tippa, stylized spike meant to align with the constellation of Enlil's belt. Scholars still argue whether that alignment was astronomical precision or decorative flair. But no one argues when the priest is watching. You wipe your hands carefully, bow low, and back away from the altar. The air still smells like rose and cinnamon, and behind that, a hint of goat. You nod to yourself. The balance is restored. The gods have their feast. And the goat, for now, is someone else's problem. You return to the main incense station, just in time to find someone fiddling with your brazier. Not just any someone knitter. The sandal-scuffing, herb-mislabeling menace of the temple's junior staff. He's poking at the coals with a stick. Clearly meant for sweeping ash. And now there's a puff of black smoke curling toward the ceiling vents like an apology in progress. You step in quietly, pluck the stick from his hand, and hand him a bundle of cedar twigs instead. No words, just a look. He nods, chastened, and melts into the background like badly burned storax. The brazier itself is fussy today. The coals glow, a little too hot, the base a little cracked, and the pedestal it rests on is doing this strange thing where it wobbles if you step too close. Still, it must be done. You kneel and place the next round of incense carefully, sandalwood slivers, powdered cinnamon, and just a pinch of crushed acacia pods. This is the sky-sweeping blend, meant to rise high and cleanly into the open air above the altar. You strike the firestone against the iron edge of your ring, and watch sparks jump to the dried bark beneath the charcoal. It catches slowly. Then hungrily, smoke begins to climb. Not in a coil, not in a messy waft, but in a narrow column, the kind temple elders call a ladder to the divine. You always liked that phrase. It makes the job sound a little more poetic than "don't let the smoke drift into the priest's face again." You stand and gently fan the smoke toward the sanctuary's central axis. There's a rhythm to it. 4 fans to the left, 3 to the right. Pause, repeat. If you go too fast, the smoke scatters. Too slow, it clings to the floor like someone spilled a jar of fog. It's a dance you've learned with your hands, and your elbows, and your nose. A bird chirps from somewhere outside, just a single, short trill. The kind that reminds you there's a world beyond this temple, one where smoke is just ... smoke. But not here. Here, smoke is a message. It thickens now, as the cinnamon kicks in. The scent is sweet but sharp, curling high like it's chasing the clouds. Your eyes water slightly, but you keep fanning. A high priest walks by, mutters something about pleasing aroma, and keeps walking. This is the equivalent of a standing ovation. You allow yourself a small internal bow, but then the wind shifts. A gust, barely a whisper, curls down through the ceiling vent and shoves the smoke sideways, right into the face of an approaching priest. You freeze. He coughs. He squints. He says nothing, but adjusts his sash in a way that very clearly means, do better. You nod. You already have a plan. You reposition the brazier slightly, angle the pedestal with a folded piece of broken pottery, and switch the fan's grip. The smoke straightens. The room exhales. You've turned it around. Historians still debate whether Mesopotamian incense burning was mainly olfactory or symbolic. You know the answer is yes. The scent is everything. The rising smoke is everything. And the way it moves, the way it dances with the light. That's half the point. You could burn dung and dust if it looked good enough. Actually, no, you tried that once. Never again. You look up. The smoke has now reached the upper beams high. Thin wooden slats darkened by years of soot and ritual. Light spears down between them in slivers, and the smoke finds those beams like it's been looking for them all. Morning, it slides up and disappears into the bright air above. Gone, lifted. This is why they call it sweeping the sky. You're cleaning a space the gods might pass through, one curl of scented smoke at a time. You glance across the temple. Another attendant is prepping the second brazier on the southern side. He's newer. He's panicking slightly because his smoke is drooping like a sad string. You make a mental note to help him later. Right now, your job isn't done. You open the next pouch, galbanum bitter and sharp. The resin crumbles under your fingertips. You sprinkle it on the coals and step back as the scent shifts. Instantly gone is the sweetness, replaced by something piercing. Not unpleasant, just commanding. This is the wake-up call of incense. The kind that makes even the gods, supposedly, sit up straighter. There's a reason they burn this blend before judgment rituals. No one slouches when galbanum is in the air. You wipe your hands on your sash and take a moment. The temple is quiet now. The goat is gone. The smoke is rising evenly. You let yourself stand still. The scent of cinnamon lingers in your nose, chased by that bite of galbanum. It's strangely grounding. Like standing between fire and water, earth and sky, fig cake and cold honey wine. You're part of a conversation. No one can hear, only smell. You gather the fan, the spent coals, and the cracked scoop. The latter goes back into your robe, pocket tool, fix it later, or try. It's sentimental. You made it when you were just beginning. It has no ceremonial value, and smells faintly of burnt peach leaves. But you like it, as you move toward the next station. A thin column of smoke drifts past your shoulder, graceful and slow. You can't help but watch it. It curves toward the ceiling, pauses, and vanishes. That's the moment you always wait for. The sky is swept. The path is clear. And even if you slipped once or twice on soot, on goat droppings, on expectations, you did your part. And the gods, well, if they're not impressed, at least they're well-scented. The temple courtyard is already baking under the early afternoon sun, its flagstones shimmering faintly as you step out with your arms full of linen wraps and a flask of cinnamon-infused oil. This is not a break. This is the sweating ritual. A daily ordeal disguised as purification. It's part exercise, part prayer, part extremely hot mistake. Still, no one argues, because according to one sacred scroll, the gods favor those who cleanse their skin with effort. Translation: Welcome to the temple gym. You make your way toward the corner enclosure. A walled section of the courtyard lined with flat stones and shaded only by a very tired fig tree. The wraps you carry are dyed pale yellow with saffron, just enough color to mark them as ritual tools, not regular linens. You drape them over a reed mat and glance around. A few other attendants are already here, stripped to their waistcloths and glistening like figs on a griddle. There's a specific scent in the air, cinnamon oil warmed by sun, mingling with human effort and last night's faded incense. It's not unpleasant, just ... intense. You spread the oil across your arms and chest, rubbing it in until your skin shines like a bronze statue in moonlight. The cinnamon burns slightly. You remind yourself this is good. Sacred, even. You settle onto a flat stone and begin your breathing. Inhale through the nose, hold, exhale through the mouth. It's meant to align you with the rhythm of the divine, but mostly it makes you very aware of how loud your own stomach is when you haven't eaten since pre-dawn prayers. A soft grunt to your left draws your attention. One of the older attendants is already mid-squat, muttering hymns as he sweats. You nod to him. He doesn't nod back. He's too busy reciting a list of storm gods under his breath like a mantra. This ritual isn't random. There are assigned movements, shoulder rolls, deep bends, long stretches, all performed in sequence. You follow them, slowly, mindfully, and with the growing suspicion that someone added extra lunges just to be cruel. But you push through, because the sweat is the goal, and sweat you do. Thick, fragrant beads of it, sliding down your arms, pooling at your collarbones. The cinnamon oil blends with your body heat and creates a scent that would make a merchant weep with envy. You smell like a sacred pastry left too long in the sun. Historians still argue whether these rituals were designed for health, spiritual alignment, or just to keep attendants from falling asleep during midday prayers. Whatever the truth, you're now sweating in a very holy way, and your knees are starting to tremble. You shift to the sitting posture, legs crossed, palms up, and whisper the recitation. Each line is meant to correspond to a scent. Fragrance of cedar, strength of roots, breath of juniper, purity of air, oil of cinnamon, fire of will. You try not to think about how your will is currently busy imagining cold dates and a nap. After 30 minutes, an elder walks by and rings the copper bell. You exhale in relief. Ritual complete. Now comes the drying, delicate, awkward, and extremely slippery. You dab your skin with fresh linen cloths, ones that have been steeped in lemon water and crushed basil. It feels cold. It feels divine. You resist the urge to roll around in them like a blessed burrito. Next, the re-oiling. Not as much this time, just enough to seal in the prayer. According to the scroll, that's mostly a list of what not to do when using sacred oils. Top of the list, do not drink the oil, no matter how sweet it smells. A rule someone definitely broke at some point. The oil for post-sweat anointing is lighter, a blend of sesame and mint, with a touch of storax. It smells clean, crisp, like a cool breeze over warm sand. You press a few drops to your wrists, your neck, the arches of your feet. You breathe it in. You feel better. Sore, yes. Smelling vaguely like dessert, also yes. But centered, clear. You gather your used linens and place them in the reed basket marked unclean. Someone will wash them later, in barley lye and prayers. You've done that chore before. It's exactly as fun as it sounds. Before returning to the inner chambers, you pause at the edge of the courtyard, letting the last bit of sun dry your skin. You watch as two younger attendants chase a bee away from the fig tree. Their laughter bubbles up into the air, cutting through the thick silence of the temple. It's rare to hear laughter here. You savor it. The fig tree, despite its sad shape, offers one fruit. You pluck it gently, just a small, underripe oraband, offer it at the base of the sacred washing stone. Not part of the official ritual, but a gesture you like. A thank you to the heat, the sweat, the soreness. A thank you to the cinnamon oil that somehow didn't drip into your eyes this time. You return inside. The shadowed halls smell cooler, darker, more composed. But the warmth clings to you like a memory. You carry the scent of effort now, of fire drawn from within. And whether the gods care or not, you do. And that's enough. And now you drift further into the maze of smells, past the flickering braziers, and into the quieter, more secluded quarters of the temple. This is where the preparation of the more sacred scents takes place, those used only in the most intimate rites and moonlit offerings. You don't speak here. No one does. The silence is thick, and the smoke curls slower, like it knows this room demands respect. Tonight, your fingers hover above trays of resins and waxes. There's galbanum, heavy and slightly bitter, almost medicinal in its mystery. Next to it lies labdanum, thick and sticky, with a scent like sun-baked bark and old leather, a perfume that feels older than language itself. These aren't your everyday temple scents. These are the ones used to commune with the divine, the ones reserved for moments when the gods might be paying attention. The sacred formula for these oils is passed down orally, with a level of secrecy usually reserved for state secrets or embarrassing teenage poetry. You memorize the order of each ingredient like a lullaby, adding precise drops into a shallow ceramic mixing bowl. One drop too many of cedar, and you'll offend Enlil. Too little myrrh, and Ishtar might sulk. No pressure with your small copper. Stir, you begin to blend. The temple cats, who you now believe might be minor deities in disguise, lounge nearby, tails flicking in lazy semicircles. You try not to think about that time one of them knocked over a vial of orris root essence, setting off a chain reaction that ended with an acolyte slipping on fragrant oil and landing in a basket of figs. That scent, combo figs and foot ointment, was not well received. Tonight's blend is destined for the sacred anointing of the high priest's robes. You press the mixture into tiny wax-sealed pots, each marked with a sun symbol. Once cooled, they'll be handed off to the robe keepers, who will carefully daub the hems and cuffs so that even the mere swish of his garments will carry a waft of heaven. Historians still argue whether these anointing rituals were meant for divine communication, or simply to show off in the temple courtyard. Either way, it worked. No one could ignore a high priest trailing a scent cloud thick enough to render nearby birds drowsy. Mesopotamian clergy didn't do subtle. They believed if you were going to smell holy, you might as well announce it. 3 streets away. There's another reason for these heady potions, though. Beneath the theological gloss, you know the air in the temple could sometimes grow a little too natural. Let's just say ventilation wasn't a strong point of mud brick architecture. And the combination of roasting offerings, barefoot acolytes, and the occasional sacrificial goat did not result in a spa-like atmosphere. Enter the sacred oils, the great equalizers of olfactory chaos. Still, there's magic in the mess. You remember when you were first permitted to craft a blend entirely by instinct, without instruction. You chose benzoin, a bit of a popanax, and some aged rose petals from a priest's garden. The result wasn't divine. It smelled vaguely like medicinal jam, but you were praised for your creativity. Even Enki appreciates experimentation, they said. You weren't sure whether that was encouragement or damage control. Behind you, an older attendant plucks a twist of bark from a pouch and tosses it into a small brass burner. The smoke rises in lazy curls, and for a moment, The air shimmers. Not from magic, just heat, humidity, and too many ingredients dancing at once. But still, it's easy to believe that the gods are somewhere just beyond the veil, watching from the smoke, nodding, or occasionally rolling their eyes. The sacred scents have another role too, timekeeping. Yes, before sand timers or water clocks. You judged time by the burn of a temple blend. One pinch of holy frankincense meant 15 minutes, give or take. 2 pinches of amber resin. An hour, assuming no drafts. This method was almost always wrong, but charmingly so, like relying on a cat to remember your birthday by now. Your hands are sticky with unguents, your tunic bears splashes of dark resin, and your nose has stopped registering the more aggressive notes. This is what the attendants call scent blindness. It means you've arrived at the meditative phase, the point where your body forgets it exists and your brain hums like a beeswax lamp. You finish the batch. Each pot is lined up like sleepy soldiers, waiting for the dawn's ritual. You place a palm gently on each one, not for magic, but acknowledgement. You've coaxed something into existence, something ancient and invisible, yet felt. The kind of presence that doesn't need to be seen to matter. And while some believe the power of the gods lay in thunder and war and celestial signs, you know better. You've breathed in their whispers. You've swirled their messages in wax and oil. Their secrets aren't shouted from mountaintops. They're tucked in jasmine petals and hidden in the hush between one drop and the next. You shift your weight ever so slightly, the packed earthen floor of the temple beneath your sandaled feet, offering no cushion, just a subtle coolness. Task is more than incense and body oil. Today, you're preparing an entire chamber for a visiting high priest from another city, Uruk, maybe. Or was it Sipper? The news always arrives muffled and delayed, like sound traveling through water. What you do know is that the temple's scent must greet him like a living hymn the moment he steps in. No pressure. You've been assigned to the room's corners, yes, all 4 of them. It's your job to grind and burn a specific blend of resin and dried florals at each one, creating a balance of air currents, aromas, and energy. Or so the senior attendants say. It's more choreography than chemistry. You carry your little copper brazier, fingers stained from previous experiments, and begin with the northeast corner, always the starting point. Because apparently, even fragrance has a cardinal alignment. The mix is something you've never quite gotten used to: frankincense, dried iris root, and crushed date blossom, sprinkled with what you suspect is dried eel skin. Why, no one explains. Maybe it's symbolic. Maybe it just makes the air vibrate differently. Historians still argue whether this combination was rooted in theology or just a very successful trial-and-error accident. Either way, the smoke lifts, curling like whispered secrets around the intricate wall carvings of winged gods and lions. You shuffle to the southeast corner, relighting your smoldering braid of reeds, now blackened and wilting but still somehow fragrant. The new blend has a citrusy top note, bitter orange peel, you think meant to awaken the spiritual presence of the room. Honestly, it mostly awakens your sinuses, which sting a bit as the sharpness cuts through the heavier bass notes. You blink through the haze and catch the faint shimmer of oil catching light on the gold-trimmed idol in the center. It's working. At least, it smells like it is at the 3rd corner, the southwest. You pause. This corner is always the trickiest where drafts sneak in and carry your precious smoke up and away too fast. You've got a trick, though, a fringe tactic whispered to you by an older attendant named Potesi, who swears by putting a shallow dish of honey water on the floor to anchor the scent. Does it make sense? Not really. Does it work? Honestly, sometimes. It definitely makes the floor sticky though, and attracts curious ants, who probably don't belong in the divine aroma-scape. And finally, the Northwest, the sacred anchor, according to a tablet fragment someone dug up and promptly half-translated. It's all very speculative. Of course, historians still argue whether the Northwest was truly considered the gateway of divine reception, or if that's just a poetic guesswork, layered onto what was probably just a colder corner. Either way, you kneel and light your last bowl, this blend, sandalwood and blue lotus. It's subtle and calming like the soft whisper of an old friend. The air by now is thick with aroma, soft tendrils of different scents dancing into one another, curling toward the ceiling beams like ghostly silk. The priest is set to arrive within the hour, and you're told to remain outside the chamber once he enters. The scent must be uninterrupted, no footsteps, no breath, not even the rustle of your robe, so you sit just outside, resting your head against a cool mud brick wall. You can still smell your work smoke, blossom, spice, and something deeply earthy. You've done your part. This chamber, for now, belongs to the gods, and to a very pampered visiting priest with a sensitive nose. Still, as you drift in the quiet moment before being called again, you wonder about all the things you'll never get to see. What the priests do behind closed curtains. Whether the gods notice the extra pinch of saffron you snuck into the mix. And whether someone centuries from now, someone studying faded tablets and brittle incense bowls will know just how much of your life was measured in scent, in smoke, in silence. You smile faintly. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll assume the high priest did all the work himself. Historians often do that, and then a breeze carries the very first whiff of your Northwest blend past your face, and you close your eyes, not out of pride, but out of sheer, contented relief that the scent is holding steady. You don't remember falling asleep, but you must have drifted off for a while. When you wake, the shadows have shifted, stretching longer down the temple corridor, and your back is lightly stiff from leaning against the wall. There's no sound from the prepared chamber, none at all. That's a good sign. Either the high priest is still within, wrapped in the sacred aromas and meditating with the gods, or he has left quietly, satisfied and serene, perhaps unaware that a sleepy junior attendant sat just outside, holding the space still for him like a loyal dog beside a dream. You stretch subtly, the kind of stretch that keeps your feet flat and doesn't rustle your robe, just in case someone important is still watching. Then you rise and begin your next set of tasks, these ones less spiritual and more necessary. The outer courtyard's incense braziers have cooled, and their ash needs emptying. The trays used to prepare the offering bread need to be returned to the inner kitchen carefully, of course, because the cooks are notoriously territorial and will scold you if you stack the trays the wrong way. One time, you placed the flat ones over the concave ones and were given a silent treatment that lasted 3 days. You don't mind kitchen errands, really. The stone walls in there radiate warmth from the clay ovens, and sometimes, If you're lucky, someone will press a spare fig cake into your palm when no one's looking. But you're not expecting one today. Today is an official visit kind of day, and everything is just a little too crisp. Too formal. By the time you return from the kitchen, the sky is melting into a shade of soft gold, that familiar Mesopotamian dusk where the walls glow orange and birds make looping shapes overhead. It's during this golden hour that the temple initiates sweep the inner courtyards, not for dirt, but for presence. Each brushstroke of the broom is a motion meant to encourage calm. You like this part. It feels like painting with absence. Your broom is simple, made from tied reeds, and it whispers across the stone like an old friend. You start in the corner by the fig tree, which grows too close to the wall, its branches always trying to reach into the priest's quarters. Some say the fig is sacred. Others say it's just stubborn. Either way, it watches you with the quiet patience of something very old. As you sweep, the courtyard dust rises in lazy golden spirals, dancing briefly in the slanting light before settling again. There's a rhythm to it. Sweep, step, sweep, pause. You don't think about anything in particular while you do it. Your body knows the motions better than your mind does. It's like breathing through your arms. A few other attendants join in, their brooms swishing in tandem like gentle percussion. No one talks. Talking would break it. And then a small sound barely there, just the soft crackle of a sandal heel on grit. You turn, and there he is, the visiting high priest, exiting the scented chamber. His expression unreadable, his gaze distant and heavy with whatever communion he's just experienced. He walks past you without acknowledgement, not out of rudeness, but because, in that moment, he is elsewhere, probably halfway between this world and the next. You don't need acknowledgement. You did your part. He disappears down the corridor toward the guest chambers, and with him, the last of the days. Formalities slip away. There are murmurs, now normal human voices returning to their usual pitch, servants trading empty trays, guards laughing under their breath. You finish your sweeping. The sun finally kisses the horizon, and a bell sounds softly 3 times. That's your cue to retreat to the southern wing for the evening cycle, what some call wind-down duties, though the phrase is too modern to have ever been written on a clay tablet. Your tasks here are subtle. Checking that oil lamps are full, extinguishing those not needed, smoothing the ceremonial mats laid out for night meditation. There's comfort in this quiet maintenance. No one expects speeches from you, or visions, or spiritual insight. You are the steward of details, the caretaker of the unnoticed. Without you, the whole thing would slowly tilt off balance, like a chariot wheel, just a little loose. As night fully drapes itself across the sky, a chill seeps into the air. You light one final lamp for yourself, place it near your shared sleeping quarters, and nestle down on your mat. The day has burned itself out with all the calm majesty of a sacred fire, and as your eyes begin to close, the scent of blue lotus still lingers faintly on your robe. You sleep, you wake before the sun, not because anyone calls you, not because there is a bell or a loud command, but because the rhythm of temple life is now carved into your bones like an inscription on wet clay. The light hasn't even begun to tiptoe over the rooftops, and yet your eyes open softly to the bluish silence of the Mesopotamian predawn. For a moment, you stay still on your mat. watching the faint glow of the small lamp you left burn in's flame, now low, flickering like a tired dancer. You feel the chill, light as linen, pressing in through the stone walls, and draw your robe tighter around your shoulders. There's a strange beauty to this time of day, a kind of sacred emptiness. Even the birds haven't begun their squabbling yet. You rise without sound, stepping carefully between sleeping forms of other attendants. The floor is cold beneath your feet, and each step feels oddly deliberate, like a ritual in itself. Your first duty, before anything else, is to greet the sacred stillness. You do this not with a spoken prayer, but with emotion, pouring fresh water into a carved basin at the eastern wall, letting it trickle with a soft splash, echoing faintly. You dip your hands in the cool water, wash your face, and then gently press your palms to the sun symbol etched into the stone behind the basin. A quiet gesture, an offering of presence. Outside, the sky has begun to bloom with the first fragile streaks of amber. The city, though still mostly asleep, is slowly taking shape in the distance, a scatter of rooftops, smoke tendrils, and half-drawn silhouettes of early risers. From the temple's high terrace, it looks peaceful. You know it won't stay that way long. Traders, carts, priests, animals, and complaints will all rise with the heat. But for now, you take your time lighting the first ceremonial flame. The kindling is carefully arranged tiny bundles of dry reeds, tied with thread, and you use an ember preserved from the night before to coax it to life. It catches quickly. The flame quivers, golden and eager, casting the first dancing shadows of the day on the worn walls. You place the flame before the small shrine near the entryway, a quiet place dedicated to Nabu, god of scribes and wisdom. No one will notice this little fire but you, and that's the point. As the sky lightens further, more attendants begin to stir. You hear the familiar rustle of robes, the soft cough of someone still half asleep, the clink of a bronze bowl being set down too hard. The temple is waking up, and with it, so must you. You begin the gentle clatter of morning readiness, refilling water jars, laying out ritual tools, polishing the ceremonial cups with a cloth that has seen 1,000 dawns. The process is not rushed, nor is it slow. It moves at the same pace as the light rising in the east. Today, a new set of scribes will visit to record the temple's tribute log. This means scrolls, ink blocks, fresh clay tablets, and that one irritable official who always asks if the quill feathers are trimmed too short. You prepare for them patiently, placing everything where it belongs under the high shelf, beside the lotus carving. Near the feather bundles, each placement a tiny act of care. By the time the sun is fully awake, so is the temple. Footsteps echo louder now, voices begin to rise and swirl, and the peaceful hush of dawn is replaced with the daily dance of divine bureaucracy. It's not loud or frantic, but it's steady like river water pulling at your ankles, and still. You move through it all like a current beneath the surface. Quiet, constant, necessary. Mid-morning brings a brief reprieve. While others gather to review offerings and ceremonial documentation, you retreat to the herb courtyard, where sunlight cuts sharp shadows between the stone columns. You love this space, the smell of crushed mint, the slow buzzing of bees around, the lavender stalks, the low chant of a distant wind harp. You sit near the thyme bushes, nibbling a piece of leftover barley bread from your pouch. It's dry, but it tastes of effort, and effort has its own flavor. You watch the bees a long while. No one interrupts you. Eventually, a bell rings from the far hall, calling you to help with temple cleaning. You rise, dust the crumbs from your robe, and move back into the day. More water to carry, more surfaces to smooth, more lamps to tend. There's a satisfaction in these loops, in doing them well, in the simple perfection of being relied upon. The sun climbs high, then begins its descent, and you feel the slow ache settle into your shoulders. A quiet, familiar ache. The ache of one who keeps the sacred hum steady not by leading prayers, but by sweeping the dust. And when the last of the scrolls is stored, the last tablet pressed and cooled, the last fig placed before the gods, you again find yourself in the quiet outer hall, the same one where you began. You sit once more against the wall, and again, you watch the shadows grow. You wake up early again, the barest hint of dawn, just a lavender smudge behind the temple's great stone columns. Your first breath is sharp with the coolness of morning, but quickly, the familiar scent of pine resin wafts into your nostrils. The burner has already been kindled. You stretch your limbs, slow and stiff, like a reed basket uncoiling after too much sun. Then you rise, because this morning you are scheduled for a less glamorous task, preparing the scent offering for the royal visit. And when the king shows up, he does not want a single whiff of fish market funk anywhere near his nostrils. First things first, you head down to the inner stores, past that cracked lion mural you keep meaning to tell someone about. The incense storeroom is sealed tight behind a clay-bolted door, and you carefully break it open. Inside, stacked in little reed trays and wrapped in linen, are the ingredients you'll need. Powdered frankincense from Arabia, galbanum resin, like sticky amber tears, a suspiciously sweet myrrh that stains your fingertips dark brown, and the temple's own secret addition, dried petals of a blue lotus flower, which no one can agree is native or imported. You mix them slowly, whispering the chant you barely understand but know by heart, and the powder darkens as the fragrances blend. Once ready, you pour it into a shallow dish of carved alabaster. Then you carry it with both hands, like it's a sleeping kitten, up the long steps toward the courtyard. Already, other attendants are sweeping the mosaic floor, lighting torches, humming tunelessly to stay awake. You nod to the priest in charge of fire. He's got soot in his eyebrows and absolutely no patience. He watches you place the dish on the golden brazier meant only for royalty, and he doesn't speak, which you take as approval. Just as well. You've dropped a ceramic jar before, and that lecture still rings in your ears now. The preparation turns to presentation. You change into fresh linen robes, scented with oil steeped in chamomile and cedarwood. Then braid your hair with perfumed strands again, not for fashion but function. The Mesopotamian idea of wow factor is a full sensory ambush. Fragrance, sound, texture, shimmer. The golden necklace you wear jingles slightly as you move. And though it's not heavy, the sound reminds you that you're playing a role in the theater of sacred power. And then it happens. Trumpets blare in a series of short, flat bursts. You wince a little. They always catch you off guard. From the northern gate, the royal procession enters, with the king seated high on a litter adorned with ivory and lapis. His eyes are half-lidded, whether from disinterest or an extra cup of beer that morning, you don't know. But when he reaches the brazier, He pauses. He sniffs. You swear he sniffs again, and then he leans forward and murmurs something to the high priest. You freeze. Your palms sweat. Is that a compliment or a complaint? You can't hear from this distance, and none of the priests are reacting yet, so you don't bolt for the Euphrates just yet. Later, much later, you find out from a gossiping kitchen boy that the king asked where the scent was from, and the high priest, with the confidence of a man who hasn't mixed resin in his life, claimed it was a long-lost Akkadian recipe. Which it wasn't. You made it. You, the scent blend, you fretted over, recited over, stirred like it was a potion meant to raise the dead. It caught a king's notice. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian kings truly cared about such rituals, or merely tolerated them to appease the priestly caste. Some records paint monarchs as deeply spiritual, visiting temples in states of trance or ecstasy. Others suggest the more cynical approach, pomp for politics' sake. You suspect both are true, like a stew with too many ingredients, where every flavor sneaks in eventually. But for you, standing there sweating beneath your linen robes, and smelling faintly of gardenia and warm ash, it doesn't really matter. The offering was accepted. The king didn't keel over. No one yelled. That's a victory. After the visit, there's cleanup. Always cleanup. You carry the now empty incense trays back to storage, careful not to spill a single grain. The soot gets scrubbed off the courtyard tiles, and one poor novice gets stuck picking out crushed petals from the seams of the mosaic. You help her, both of you grumbling, but secretly, you don't mind. This part, the winding down, feels satisfying, like the final hum after a chant, like the last scent before sleep. A fringe tablet once translated, or maybe mistranslated, historians aren't sure, describes a temple attendant who invented a fragrance so powerful it caused the king to weep. That may be myth, but as you pack away your tools and catch the lingering hint of blue lotus on your hands, you wonder if maybe you've done something close. The sun hangs high by now, lazily pulsing above the ziggurat in a hazy yellow dome. Shadows stretch and soften as the heat rises, warping the air above the courtyard like rippling water. You take shelter beneath the shade of the temple's columned veranda, sipping slowly from a clay cup of barley water. It's tepid and vaguely sour, but refreshingly familiar. Around you, the lull of midday sets in less bustle, fewer footsteps. Even the doves nesting in the cracks above seem too drowsy to coo. This is your moment to rest, though rest is never quite what it sounds like as you sit. Your fingers absent-mindedly trace the grooves of a palm leaf basket beside you, and your mind starts turning toward your next assignment, categorizing a batch of omens drawn from sheep livers. A delivery came in just before the royal visit, and now the divination chamber is stacked with wax tablets, charcoal rubbings, and regrettably wrapped organ or two. You eventually rise and head into the reading room, where the walls are lined with clay tablets instead of scrolls, each etched with cuneiform characters so sharp and fine they look as though they were stitched with reed thread. You take a seat on a stool that groans softly under your weight and start the slow process of deciphering. These omens are written in the standard format. If the liver has a swelling in this section, it means ... followed by a prediction, usually vague, often ominous. Will the city face drought? Will the king remain in power? Will crops fail? Will a certain minor scribe develop a rash behind his left knee? The scribes who prepare these predictions often try to balance ambiguity with alarm, enough to impress the priests without triggering panic. It's a strange kind of storytelling, one where the organ is both script and stage. You study each liver, diagram carefully, using a thin reed stylus to cross-check notations. You've grown decent at this, though you're still unsure whether the predictions are meant to be believed or just acknowledged politely. Once, you asked an older scribe whether any of the omens ever came true. He looked at you for a long time and said, "They only come true if the right people believe them." You've never forgotten that. After a few hours of this, the day begins to tip again. Shadows lengthen. Torch sconces are relit. A gentle chime signals the evening meal, and you wander toward the dining terrace, drawn more by habit than hunger. Bowls of stewed lentils, flatbread, a scattering of dates. You take a little of each, the way you always do, and sit near the edge of the terrace where you can see the Euphrates, glimmering like a slow serpent in the distance. This is your favorite part of the day, the golden in-between, when the sky softens into copper and the temple cools down, becoming more echo than heat. You listen to idle chatter among the others. A junior acolyte laughing over a goat that wandered into the archive room. A priest muttering about the temple's wine supply being watered down. You don't say much, you just watch, and breathe, and exist quietly, like the steady flame of the lamps overhead. Later, as twilight deepens and stars begin to prick the sky one by one, you return to your sleeping mat, folding your robes neatly and placing them at your feet. The chamber is dim. Now, perfumed faintly with sandalwood, the air soft and dry. From somewhere outside, a flute plays a simple, slow melody that coils around your thoughts like a lullaby. You lie back and stare at the clay ceiling. Tomorrow will bring more rituals, more texts, more ink, more heat. Perhaps a dream will come up. Vivid one with golden lions, or rain falling upward, or the gods speaking in riddles. Or perhaps not. Perhaps you'll just sleep, dreamless, folded in the quiet hum of a city that spins on cuneiform, sacrifice, and barley beer. You are a Babylonian ziggurat guard. Not a warrior, not a priest, not a king, but someone steady, someone trusted, a keeper of rhythms and routines. A small, patient part of a massive, breathing system. And in the long scroll of history, with its kingdoms rising and falling, its tablets buried and unearthed, you may be forgotten by name, but your hands wrote the records, your feet walked the paths, your scent welcomed kings. In the temple's heart, your silence mattered, and that, perhaps, is enough.
you.